well. This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to hospital in the early hours of the morning. Surgeons tried for 2 hours to save her life, but she died at 3 o'clock. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, "The Queen and the Prince of Wales are deeply shocked and distressed by this terrible news. Normal programmes on BBC Television have been suspended while we bring you in Britain and around the world the latest developments." Diana, Princess of Wales, died at 3 o'clock this morning after a car crash in Paris. Her companion, Dodi Fayed, and their driver were also killed in the accident. Diana, Princess of Wales, sustained severe chest injuries. She was taken to a hospital in the city where surgeons spent 2 hours trying to save her life. She had been a passenger in a car which crashed in a tunnel next to the River Seine. The accident happened as press photographers pursued the car at high speeds through a tunnel under the Place de l'Alma in the centre of the city. The princess's Mercedes hit a road pillar and smashed into a wall. The French authorities have begun a criminal investigation. 7 photographers are being questioned as witnesses. Tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, have been coming in during the morning. The Prime Minister said he was utterly devastated. She was, he said, a wonderful and warm human being who touched the lives of so many others in Britain and throughout the world with comfort. The leader of the opposition, William Hague, said he was absolutely shocked. The whole nation will be in shock and in tears at this awful news. The Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, said, "I'm speechless with shock at the horror and sadness of this terrible tragedy." And tributes have been paid by world leaders. The French President, Jacques Chirac, said Diana, Princess of Wales, was a young woman of our age, warm, full of life and generosity. President Clinton said he and his wife were profoundly saddened by this tragic event. A spokesman for the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said the princess's death was a tragic loss. The international community has lost an important ambassador of goodwill. From Lambeth Palace, a spokesman for the Archbishop of Canterbury said the prayers of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York will be with the families of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Mr. Al Fayed at this tragic moment. Cardinal Hume, leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, said, "I'm greatly distressed at the news of Princess Diana and the awful suddenness in which it came upon us all." A spokesman for Mother Teresa of Calcutta said she was very sorry and that she was praying for the princess. The owner of Harrods, whose son died in the car crash, said the deaths were appalling and quite needless. The world, he said, had lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable. Our correspondent, Alison Holt, now reports.
The twisted wreckage of the Mercedes in which the princess was travelling is the clearest testimony to the sheer force of the crash. The accident happened shortly after midnight. According to eyewitnesses, the car hit a pillar in a tunnel on one of the fast-flowing roads which runs alongside the River Seine. They were apparently being pursued at high speed by photographers on motorbikes. Within minutes of the crash, the area was sealed off as police and ambulance teams struggled to reach the 4 trapped inside. Dodi Al Fayed, the princess's constant companion in recent weeks, was dead at the scene, as was their chauffeur. The princess and her bodyguard had to be cut from the wreckage. Both were taken to hospital with serious injuries. Those who witnessed the aftermath of the accident knew the gravity of what they were seeing.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later, ambulance about 15 minutes later.
At the hospital, there was no word on the princess's condition for several hours, but inside doctors were fighting to save her. She had severe internal injuries and underwent emergency surgery. But just before 5 o'clock this morning, the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement broke the tragic news that the princess had died.
Au nom du gouvernement français,
he expressed the regret of the French people, but it was the British ambassador to Paris who voiced the deep shock and sorrow that was felt by all.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident. The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales. I should like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister and the French authorities and the medical team here at this hospital for all they have done tonight at the time of this terrible tragedy. Thank you.
Immediately after the crash, police took away a motorbike for further investigation. The high-speed chase with photographers on bikes pursuing the car is thought to have begun as the couple left the Ritz Hotel, where they'd been having dinner. The hotel belongs to Mr. Al Fayed's father, and the man driving them was a security agent from the Ritz. Mr. Al Fayed's spokesman says the whole family is devastated.
I've spoken to Mr. Al Fayed, and his view is that this is an appalling and quite needless tragedy. The world has lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable, and Mr. Al Fayed has lost his beloved eldest son. Mr. and Mrs. Al Fayed are devastated by their loss, and they share the sorrow of the princess's family.
Police have already begun gathering evidence for their investigation into what happened, and 7 photographers have been arrested. Political reaction to the tragedy was swift. The first came from the other side of the world, where the Foreign Secretary is visiting the Philippines.
I am greatly shocked by this news. Our first thoughts must be with her children and with her family at this time of immense loss to them. I was fortunate to have the opportunity of working with the Princess on her international charity work. I believe what has happened is a tragic loss at a young age of someone who'd shown great courage and commitment in drawing attention to serious issues. For the next few days, her family and the nation must have time to come to terms with their immense sadness and loss. In the longer term, serious questions will need to be asked as to whether the aggressive intrusion into her privacy has contributed to this tragedy.
She was an incredible figure. She had real star quality, as we will all never forget, and she used her position to do a great deal of good on drug issues, on AIDS issues, and so on. Of course, she was from time to time a controversial figure. I think it's, as Robin Cook has said, people will need to ask questions about intrusion into private life, but it's also too early to draw any general conclusions from one terrible incident.
For the moment, this is a personal tragedy of the most terrible sort, and I think a sense of loss and grievance for the nation and all who knew her. Her contribution was extraordinary in many ways, to things like HIV, to drugs, to AIDS, to the issue of landmines, for which she became very famous in recent days. And I think we should remember somebody who brought light and colour and compassion to our lives.
In this country today.
And a short time ago, the Prime Minister spoke of his sorrow at the tragedy.
Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her 2 sons, the 2 boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times shall we remember her, in how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy. When with just a look or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her, they regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain.
And outside the princess's home, Kensington Palace, the people have begun laying flowers in tribute. Some overcome with their grief. The scenes have been repeated outside Buckingham Palace, with people quietly paying their respects, stunned by the news. At Balmoral, where the royal family is spending the summer, flags are flying at half-mast. It was here that Prince Charles was told of Princess Diana's death, and it was here where he had to break the news to their sons. At the church where the royal family worships, there's a deep sense of loss.
People here in the parish of Cratty will feel it very personally and will share the shock and the grief of the family. The royal family, as you know, are very closely connected with the parish. They are very much part of the family of Cratty, and Princess Diana was part of that family.
The tunnel where the accident happened has now been reopened, and there too flowers have been left as a mark of people's sorrow. In coming days there will be many questions to be answered about the cause of the accident, but as that investigation gets underway, few have yet grasped the full impact of the tragedy. Alison Holt, BBC News.
7 members of the paparazzi are now in custody in Paris. Their possible role in the crash which killed Diana, Princess of Wales, will now be investigated. Our correspondent Kevin Connolly is in Paris. Kevin, what shape is the police investigation taking?
Well, I think at the moment they are still trying to reconstruct exactly what happened. They've reopened the road now where the accident happened, but they conducted a very painstaking search before they did so, of course. They have the paparazzi in for questioning. There were a surprisingly large number of eyewitnesses, given that the accident happened after midnight. And from that, I think they're very confident they will be able to reconstruct more or less exactly what happened and to consider the accuracy of rumours, for example, that one of the paparazzi mounted on a motorbike swerved in front of the car carrying the princess shortly before it crashed.
Now, how could the paparazzi pursue the princess in the way that they apparently did in a country which has got such strict privacy laws?
Well, I suppose the simple truth is that the paparazzi have always lived on the edge of those laws or have simply ignored them when they've chosen to do so and when it suited them to do so. You may remember on the night that Jacques Chirac became president of France a couple of years ago, his car was surrounded by cameramen poking their lenses through the open windows to take close-up photographs of him. It's become so much a part of life here. It varies in intensity, of course, but the enormous worldwide interest in the relationship between Princess Diana and Dodi Al Fayed had, of course, pushed up the value of photographs of the couple, and that is the brutal reality which underlies this. That is the cutting edge of the news business in that particular area of news, and that is the reality behind the pictures you see in tabloid newspapers.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. And within the last few minutes, the Archbishop of Canterbury has been giving his reaction to the news of the princess's death.
Oh, I was shattered to wake up this morning and to hear that this vibrant person, Princess Diana, lost her life early this morning. It's a terrible tragedy for everybody. In some way, she grabbed the imagination of young and old alike, and it was something to do with the way in which is more than a fairy story, is that this very beautiful woman was also a very vulnerable human being, and out of that vulnerability and weakness, if you like, came lots of strength, her passion, her commitment to people. All that we have lost, and I think there's a sense in which we're all grieving because she expressed something that we all valued and loved.
Now, you had dealings with her on a personal basis. What did you make of the woman?
Yes, I had lots of conversations with her. Sometimes at her request, when she wanted to talk things through, especially leading up to the breakdown of the marriage. I made her someone who loved life. She was deeply committed, as I said earlier, to people, to issues, to causes. I found her a very interesting person. People sometimes said that she was not very intelligent. I found her actually a very intelligent person who was very committed to people and anxious to get to the bottom of things.
How does the nation deal and cope with such a loss, do you think?
I think it brings home to us the weakness of life, and as the Bible says, in the midst of life we are in death, and we need to be reminded, and we are reminded through the death of a young person like this, that death inches away from each one of us. Perhaps it will help us all to focus on the really important things of life, of human love and relationships and a faith in God. And she had a faith in God, although she wasn't the kind of person who wore religion on her sleeves. There was a deep faith there going on. And her relationship with Mother Teresa, for example, was one of the she spoke to me about. So we cope, I think, by holding on to the things that she believed in, and maybe her story that human weakness can be transcended by the inner power we have, and the grace of God that can cope with the tragedies of life.
Now, the nation has to cope with its grief, but the grief for the family must be intense.
I think at a time like this we ought to be focusing our prayers on the two boys. Of course, Dodie, who was in the car with her, and the chauffeur, we mustn't forget them either, because they're valuable in the sight of Almighty God. But to pray particularly for the two boys who will now grow up without a dearly loved mother, and they will need the support not only of Prince Charles, but everyone to take account of them as they grow up.
The Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, giving his reaction just a few minutes ago to the death of the Princess of Wales. And I'm joined in the studio by the Director of the National AIDS Trust, Derek BODELL, and our court correspondent, Jenny Bond. Jenny, I gather you've been getting more information from Buckingham Palace.
Yes, there has been a statement issued from Buckingham Palace in the past few minutes which says that the Prince of Wales has been spending this part of the morning with the two young princes at Balmoral. Most of the royal family are at Balmoral. And we're told that the Prince of Wales will fly to Paris later today to accompany the body of his former wife, Diana, back to the UK.
Which will also happen today.
It doesn't say that, but one imagines that will probably happen today. He's going to be accompanied by the princess's two sisters. That would be Lady Sarah McCorquodale, who often acted as a lady-in-waiting on foreign tours and on domestic duties, and Lady Jane Fellows, that's the wife of Sir Robert Fellows, the Queen's private secretary. So those three will be going over sometime today. And one other piece of information, that today's Premiership match, the football authorities have told us, between Liverpool and Newcastle at Anfield has been called off as a mark of respect for Diana.
So already the country is starting to react to the tragic news this morning of the death of the Princess of Wales, and reacting in all kinds of ways, because not only has that football match been cancelled, but all the charities for which the Princess did so much tremendous work are paying glowing tributes to the role that she played in their work within the country. And one of those charities is represented here with Derek BODELL, the Director of the National AIDS Trust. Derek, when the Princess reached out her hand to an AIDS patient, what did that do for the cause of AIDS? What contribution did it bring to the AIDS focus in Britain?
It actually made AIDS human in a way in which it hadn't been before. I mean, let's remember at the time she did that, a lot of people in this country, a lot of people in senior positions found it even difficult to mention the word AIDS. And the Princess of Wales took it on board and she made it her own issue.
Why did she do that?
I think the Princess of Wales saw that AIDS was a major global epidemic and that people were frightened of what it meant. People were stigmatizing people with HIV and AIDS, and she felt she could do something about that.
And as you look back now over the How many years is it since this happened? It must be 15 years?
It's probably more like about 12 years.
12 years. But as you look back over those 12 years, were there any other moments when you felt that she was reaching out to your particular charity in a way that made a difference just at the time that you needed it?
I think the Princess of Wales was acutely aware that she carried with her tremendous media attention, and she wanted to use that in the best interests of all of the charities that she worked with. And she would come to us and say, I think it's about time that I needed to be seen and be touching people, to be communicating with people, because people are forgetting that this is a global issue that we all need to care about.
Tell me about the effect that she had on AIDS patients.
Well, I think a lot of people are very cynical about the Princess of Wales. I mean, you hear a lot of negative reports about it, but I know from a recent visit she did to Mortimer Market that when she went into the room, she lights up the room. She's very natural with people. She's very easy with people. She's very amusing, which I don't think always comes across, and a very keen sense of humour. And when she's left, everybody is elated. Everybody is pleased what she's done, and they feel so touched by her kindness that it makes such a difference to people.
You said a lot of people were cynical about what she did. How did you as a charity and other charities that she helped react to the cynicism as it came across?
It's very difficult because I think in a sense the people of the country, the media of this country, had set Princess of Wales up onto a pedestal, but then they seemed almost determined to want to knock her off that pedestal. And the Princess of Wales never shied away from controversy. She wanted to make a difference in this world. She wanted to change things, and she wanted to make her contribution. And if you don't want to do that, you're bound to court a lot of criticism and a lot of comment, but she didn't deserve it.
Derek BODELL, thank you for the moment. And we go now to George Eakin, who is at Buckingham Palace. George, what's happening there?
Well, Martin, the numbers of people who've turned up here have continued to grow. Obviously, large numbers of people do turn up here anyway to see the changing of the guard ceremony, but I would say that there are now perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 people standing, watching the palace, just alone in their thoughts, really. There is no royal standard flying on the palace because the Queen and Prince Philip aren't here, but if one looks at the government buildings that are within eyeshot, the Home Office has its flag, the Union flag, flying at half-mast as a mark of respect.
George, tell me what the reaction is of people there. I mean, are they standing in silence? Is there some anger? Is there emotion?
There have been brief moments of anger, particularly earlier on this morning when some photographers and camera crews were turned on by some in the crowd who blamed them, if you like, or the media in general, for the manner in which the Princess died. But mostly people are standing just contemplating, perhaps thinking back to the last time they were here, or perhaps thinking back to the time when they saw the Prince and Princess of Wales married and standing on the balcony. I have with me two people who've come down from Blackburn, Ron and Margaret Hayes. Ron, when did you hear the news? And presumably you'll never forget the moment.
No, we won't. It was about 7:30 this morning we switched the TV on, not really expecting the news to be on. And then well, I just heard something about a tragic accident, but I didn't actually realise what it was about. And then of course we had the news brought to us that Princess Diana had been killed.
Margaret, what are your thoughts about the circumstances of her death and the suddenness of it?
Well, I'm just shocked that she's died in this way, and I feel so very sorry for her boys and the rest of her family. And she was so full of life, and it's just come to an end now. So beautiful, so full of life. And
why have you come to Buckingham Palace?
Just to pay our respects. It seems the right thing to do. Yeah.
Ron, what qualities do you think the Princess brought to bear in her public life? How will she be remembered?
I think for her youth and vitality, and perhaps trying to bring something in that brought the old traditions of the royal family as we knew it, and as we still know it, obviously. But she seemed to bring something in that brought youth and this sort of thing into the family.
And compassion too, Margaret.
Yes, yeah, very much so. Yeah.
How much did she achieve with her emphasis on helping people who had AIDS and the campaign against landmines and other issues she espoused?
I think with the landmines issue, she's brought that to the forefront, and AIDS as well. nobody wanted to know about AIDS, did they? Until Princess Diana got involved with it. But she's done a lot of good. She really has.
And what questions, Ron, finally, do you think must be asked about the manner in which she died, and the role perhaps all of us as readers of newspapers have to bear in the way in which she died, being pursued by photographers?
Yeah, well, being pursued by photographers, I mean, we all know that Diane, in some respects, wanted this sort of thing. There were times when she sought publicity. There were times that she didn't. It's just tragic that this is probably one of the times she didn't want anything to do with it, and unfortunately it's ended up in this matter, in this manner. Whether we can attribute it to that as a direct cause, I don't know. I don't know. Whether the accident may have occurred anyway, we've no idea.
Ron and Margaret Hayes, thank you both very much, and back to you in the studio.
George Eakin with two Blackburn folk, amongst the many thousands of people who've been going to Kensington Palace and to Buckingham Palace to pay their own tributes in their own way, mostly with flowers. Clarence Mitchell reports.
From first light at Kensington Palace, people had begun laying flowers. Those paying their respects to the Princess outside her official London home, united by a stunned sense of utter disbelief at what had happened overnight in Paris.
She touched groups of people that had never been touched by the royal family before. She did, for example, in the case of AIDS, she did so much to change public attitudes just by very simple things, by touching people's hands and by holding them.
She was just a shining light, and she was there for everybody. And I'm just glad towards the end she found happiness. At least she died knowing real happiness, I think.
She was just a wonderful person. I think that she's completely irreplaceable. I don't think anyone could take her place, and I think it's going to leave a terrible void in everybody's lives, especially her two sons.
She meant a lot to me. The fact is that Diana is one of the members of the royal family that the nation identifies with most, and the fact that she did a lot of work for the charities really touched my heart. And although I'm not really a royalist, I really feel compelled to come here this morning and leave these flowers for her. I'm just completely shocked. It just sounds so absurd that, well, the best one of the lot had to go first.
And at Buckingham Palace too, similar scenes. The grief being immediately felt on the streets of the capital is undoubtedly a mere foretaste of the national mourning yet to come. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News.
And police in Paris are still questioning 7 paparazzi that they arrested. It's believed that they were photographers on motorbikes who were pursuing the car containing the Princess of Wales and Dodi Fayed when it crashed. And Paul Newman joins me now from outside the police station in Paris, where the paparazzi are being questioned. What is going on, Paul?
Well, Martin, the police have confirmed here that a criminal investigation is underway. The 7 photographers, we believe, were arrested earlier on this morning. They're being held in custody here, and the questioning process will be a lengthy one. The French Interior Minister had a news conference earlier on this morning at which he made it absolutely clear that there was no doubt that Diana's vehicle was being pursued by at least 7 paparazzi, and that therefore clearly they would have a key impact on the investigation, and that questioning will continue for some time to come. Indeed, the police have not given any indication when these 7 are likely to be released. In addition, of course, they'll be very anxious to try to establish just what sort of a speed Diana's vehicle was going as it entered the tunnel, pursued by the paparazzi. There are reports that it may have been doing up to 60 miles an hour, which may account for the decimation of the vehicle in the tragedy.
Is there a strong possibility the criminal charges will be brought?
Well, all the French Interior Minister will say at this stage is that the investigation will be carried out. That may well, of course, take some time, and indeed the man who has survived, although he's still seriously injured, may well, of course, be able to paint a detailed picture if he recovers sufficiently to talk to the police. In the meantime, they're relying on their inquiries by speaking to witnesses who did see what had happened, and indeed, of course, speaking to the arrested men here. Whether, of course, they can shed any particular light on the situation remains to be seen. There's been lots of speculation about they may have been partially responsible, but of course, that is yet to be substantiated by fact.
Thank you very much indeed, and I believe we may be going now to... No, we're going now to the Culture Secretary, Chris Smith, who is joining me from our Westminster studio. Mr. Smith, you're reactions and emotions on this most tragic of days?
Well, like everyone else, the first reaction was one of shock and disbelief. And I think all of us are having difficulty in coming to terms with what is a very real tragedy. I met Princess Diana just a few weeks ago. We spent the evening talking when we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Tate Gallery. And she was warm and considerate, and all the qualities of compassion and genuine interest in what other people were thinking and doing really shone through, and it is such a loss to us all.
What role was she planning to play, and what role would the government have encouraged her to play in the public life of this country?
I think she was actually beginning to carve out for herself a real role as both someone concerned about particular issues, taking up particular charities both in Britain and across the world, but also using her fame and position to raise concern about things like the landmines issue, which she was taking up and really taking to all corners of the world, and doing so very effectively indeed. And I think it's a great loss not just to us as a nation, I think we all feel that, but also a great loss to some of those really important causes around the world which she was beginning to take up.
Mr. Smith, we have pictures now of the Queen at Balmoral just a few minutes ago. She is going to church at Crathy, the little church which she and members of the royal family have loved so much, and where prayers will undoubtedly be said this morning for the Princess of Wales. And you see there again the paparazzi present on the corner recording the arrival of the Queen, but they're behind barricades, not rushing or pursuing the car in the way that appears to have been apparent as far as the Princess of Wales is concerned. Mr. Smith, what is your reaction to the reports we are getting from Paris about the role that the paparazzi may have played in causing the crash that led to the death of the Princess?
Well, obviously we need to know a lot more about exactly what happened and how it happened. On these questions, I think now is a time for reflection rather than for rushing to any sort of decisions. But I do think that a lot of us have perhaps some thinking to do over the next few days and weeks about how this terrible tragedy came to happen.
Do you think that it would be possible to draw up some kind of law that would retain the traditional freedoms of the press in Britain to investigate and expose wrongdoing, but at the same time block off the market for those paparazzi who obtain the kind of pictures in the way that they appear to have been trying to obtain them as far as the Princess of Wales was concerned?
I don't think now is actually the time to make decisions of that kind. Obviously we need to reflect, we need to share our sense of grief as a nation, and then perhaps think about what lessons of all kinds we can learn, but now is not the time to make a decision on that.
Chris Smith, Secretary of State for Culture, thank you very much indeed. And Jenny Bond, our court correspondent, is still here. Jenny, what more have you got coming through?
We have a few more details of the Prince of Wales's movements. As I said earlier, he has spent the morning at Balmoral with his two sons. There's no evidence that he did go to church with the Queen, but we are told that later this morning he'll be flying from Aberdeen Airport direct to Paris. He will go to the hospital in Paris to thank the staff there, and he'll be accompanied by the Princess's two sisters, Lady Jane Fellowes and Lady Sarah McCorquodale, and he'll then be on the flight bringing home the body of the Princess of Wales, and that, we're told, is due to arrive at RAF Northolt in Middlesex at 1900, 7 o'clock this evening, and there will be cameras allowed there.
And the plans after that?
The plans after that are still not clear. Buckingham Palace obviously are organising this from London in close coordination with the Queen, who we understand had very little sleep obviously during the night. Some arrangements I think probably are in place for the funeral, but it was totally unexpected. One thing they have done, in fact, Buckingham Palace have set up a special condolence page on its official internet website, which they've only had for a few months.
But which has been immensely popular.
That's right. And so members of the public can pay their respects. Apparently the page has a picture of the Princess and with a black border, and the dates 1961 to 1997. So people can send their messages, and at the foot of the page there is a message from the palace which says, thank you for your kind message of condolence for the sad loss of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Do we have the website number for that? And if we haven't, maybe we shall try and get it and bring it to the viewers.
We do actually.
Have
the site can be found http://www.royal.gov.uk. A little much to take in perhaps just at the moment. We'll try to bring more on that though.
Jenny, thank you for the moment. And we understand that the brother of Diana, Princess of Wales, Earl Spencer, who I think is in South Africa, he has a house just outside Cape Town, he gave this reaction to the death of his sister.
I'm going to read this statement. Will you come closer? It was with profound shock and subsequent death in Paris early this morning. All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today. My heart goes out to the families of the others killed in this incident. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and two sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy. I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace. Thank you. Could you just tell us when you're leaving to Europe?
Sorry, could we have that statement?
Clearly angry, Earl Spencer, making a formal statement about the death of his sister. And some very, very strong language there, Jenny. He said, I always believed the press would kill her in the end. And he talked about journalists, those who had pursued the princess, having blood on their hands. Now, this is going to grow into a very big issue, isn't it?
It is, mixed with what is such a tragedy. There's a great deal of anger now coming so palpably there from her brother. I'm sure it's going to be felt by the whole family. Diana herself told me in a conversation some months ago that she felt raped by the prying eyes of the paparazzi. She said, I know I've used that word before, but it's one that I just feel is applicable. I feel raped by them, and I have to protect my sons, and that's what I'm going to do.
Do you think it is going to be possible, given that extent of anger, and if it is reflected among members of the public, is it going to be possible to make a distinction between the paparazzi who operate on the fringes of journalism and other journalists providing more mainstream stories who do not operate in that way?
I think so. I really don't think that Diana ever felt that her privacy was intruded upon by the official press, if I may put it that way. She invited us to accompany her on her tours. She invited us through a strict system, a rota system, so we had passes and we stayed where we were told, to accompany her on all her official duties. And she knew that she needed us and she wanted to publicise those causes. But it was the paparazzi, the unofficial photographers, those who were totally freelance and in it purely for the money, not to disseminate information. Those are the ones she felt raped by.
Derek BODELL, did she ever give any hint of this to you? Because, of course, when she came to see your charity, the National AIDS Trust, she wanted to be photographed because there was a cause to espouse. Did she ever hint at some of the distress that she felt at the activities of some members of the press.
Certainly, I think very much similar sort of comments to the one that Jenny has made. When she decided to reduce her commitments to the number of charities, I mean, she spoke very much about the fact that the press was a double-edged sword for her. In a sense, she could use them, or use their interest in her, to benefit the charities that she wanted to support, but at the same time it was at a huge personal cost, because the press didn't perhaps know when enough was enough, and she was always on their target list.
Do you think that it would be possible to draw up some kind of legislation that would still allow you to get publicity and other charities to get publicity for the causes that they want, but at the same time control the paparazzi? Is there anything you'd like to see happen?
I think that if there is anything that comes out of this, and I think Chris Smith said this, we need to take a long, hard look at what we want to do to protect our public figures who are in this sort of situation. But clearly, this is a huge tragedy for all of us, and the Princess of Wales has suffered unduly by press attention.
Derek, thank you for the moment. Jenny, there's one quick point you want to make.
There's one point I'd like to make clear. Yes, we are told now that at the royal party at Balmoral, those who went to church did include the Queen, as we saw, and the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen Mother, the Prince of Wales, and the two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry.
And in fact, we're looking at pictures now,
yes,
taken a few minutes ago, of the royal party arriving at the church.
It was something they did obviously every Sunday when we were there, and obviously a place to seek solace on this very, very sad day.
Do you find it surprising that they should have continued with their regular routine visit to church under these circumstances?
I don't, for two reasons. One is the nature of the royal family. They do live by a routine in which I think they find great comfort, and what better place today to find comfort than in their little church there.
Jenny, thank you. And there are others seeking comfort at Kensington Palace by laying flowers there. The queue continues to grow. Stephen Evans is there. Steve.
This queue does continue to grow. It's just a mountain of flowers, a bank of flowers. A wreath was placed a short time ago by Save the Children. I've got with me Fiona King, who placed that wreath. Tell me why you did it and why it meant something to you.
Well, it was on behalf of all the landmine survivors and victims from throughout the world. There's a UK working group on landmines here, which consists of over 50 agencies, and we wanted to drop a tribute to Princess Diana's work on the landmine campaign.
What do you think she's actually done? I mean, how has she actually helped that cause?
Well, she's added an immense amount of international publicity to the cause. It was because of her visit to Angola that so many journalists visited and covered the issue. I have to say, these weren't paparazzi, these were journalists from the normal news agencies, and they visited Angola with her and took home to thousands of people throughout the world the reality of what it's like to live in a mine-infested country.
They were very, very strong images, weren't they? It's quite a difficult line for the princess to tread.
Yes, she could see for herself the awful suffering caused. She saw this as very much a humanitarian cause rather than a political one. Of course, there are political overtones. This is about a weapon and a weapons convention. But her strong commitment and dedication to this meant she had a lot of courage in saying many of the things that she did say.
This was a real commitment, not simply a PR strategy.
No, this was a real commitment. She increasingly, actually, as time went on, she took a deeper and deeper interest in this issue through her visits to Angola and then recently to Bosnia. And we know that she had some more planned as well. She was really going to do a lot on this campaign, and she'll be missed sorely.
Fiona, thank you very much. So there you have it, Martin. The wreaths continue to come in from organisations and from ordinary people.
And as you've seen, hundreds of people have been gathering outside Kensington Palace, but outside Buckingham Palace too. At Kensington Palace, the princess's home, news of her death became known very early on, and local people and others joined the queue, as we just heard from Stephen, placing flowers and wanting to stand and silently remember the princess at the place where she lived when she was in London.
As the news of the princess's death spread, hundreds of people arrived to pay tribute at the gates of Buckingham Palace. They were there to offer their own personal thoughts, many still in shock and stunned by the news.
This is certainly a loss that is devastating. All over the whole world. The world will mourn this day.
Shock. I mean, it's the reaction of the passengers this morning.
She has a mother. I'm a mother. I mean, it's tragedy. It really is.
But the shock was mixed with anger at reports that Diana's car had been chased by paparazzi photographers. Ugly scenes developed as journalists who had assembled outside the palace were accused by members of the public of being responsible.
They killed Diana.
Commercial journalists and commercial journalists.
They killed Diana.
The arguments cast a shadow over those who came here to pay their respects, but the concerns raised will be repeated over the next few weeks as people come to terms with the loss. Karen Allen, BBC News.
And Jenny Bond, we're getting more details of the scenes at the church where the Queen and other members of the royal family went this morning.
Indeed, yes. There were flowers there laid by local people on the steps of the church, apparently. The cameras don't get very close to the church at Crathy. Dozens of people are gathered outside, and we're told that the royal party arrived at 11:30, as we saw, in a convoy. The Queen Mother was in black, and she was in the first car with the Duke of York and Peter Phillips. She was followed by Prince Charles, who was wearing a dark suit and who sat between his two sons, William and Harry, who apparently looked, as one would expect, grief-stricken but calm, we're told. And behind them there was the Queen, who was also wearing black, and it's said that she was looking extremely sombre. She was accompanied by the Duke of Edinburgh.
And just to recap, the Prince of Wales will be on his way after the service to Paris.
Yes, after church, at some stage, he is going to go with the Princess's two sisters, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows. And there's no news on the boys. We're not told whether they're going. And he will go to Paris. He wants to go and thank the hospital staff, and then he will accompany his former late wife's body back to Britain. And we're told that will arrive at RAF Northolt in Middlesex at 7 o'clock this evening.
Now, some time ago, you talked to the Princess about the late Princess, about how she had tried to bring up her children. What did she tell you were the priorities for shaping a future king and his brother?
She told me that she was going to bring them up in a way that no member of the royal family had ever been brought up before. She was determined that they should see something of what she regarded as real life. And she went about this in quite a structured way. She gave them work days and fun days. Fun days, we will remember them in baseball caps and going go-karting. But on official days, she wanted them to behave as they will have to in their future lives. She told me also that she was going to, and did, shower them with cuddles and love and hugs, because I didn't have any as a child, she said. And she also told me that she thought the country was very lucky to have William. She said, "He's all right, William."
Jenny, thank you for the moment. And we have on the telephone now Andrew Neil, who is editor-in-chief of the Scotsman and European group of newspapers up in Scotland, and of course was an editor of the Sunday Times at a time when the royal family was taking a considerable amount of criticism. And in fact, Andrew, you were the first to publish Andrew Morton's book, which was guided by the hand of the Princess of Wales.
Yes, indeed, that's a polite way of putting it, Martin. It was really almost authorised by the Princess of Wales and would never have happened and never revealed what it did do without the Princess of Wales's cooperation. Indeed, she even provided a private family photographic album to illustrate the book. And of course, as a result of that book, we will never think of the House of Windsor in the same way again. I mean, she did change our perceptions of the way the House of Windsor operates and how it behaves, and left us with many negative impressions.
Negative impressions? What do you think will be the judgment of others in 5-10 years' time about the role that she played in her moving into the royal family and then moving out again?
Well, I think people will be deeply divided on the issue. I certainly think the majority view will be that the royal family lost a huge opportunity when they lost her from the royal family. I mean, she was the young, glamorous, switched-on member of the royal family, the only real superstar that the modern royal family has, the one member of the royal family that could have taken that family and the monarchy into the 21st century and felt confident about the future. And the loss of her, not just because of her death today, but the loss of her from the functioning part of the royal family, I think was a grave loss from which it has yet to recover. and it's not clear yet that it will be able to recover. But one thing is sure, Martin, she changed our perception of the royal family in many ways, and her death now leaves the royal family in a different way than it was before.
We're seeing the flag flying at half-mast over the Palace of Westminster, where the House of Commons and the House of Lords sit. Do you think that in the wake of this, the politicians who work there are going to do anything about the paparazzi, are going to take any measures to curb those on the fringes of journalism who go beyond the bounds in the desperate search for pictures?
Well, I think they will try to do that, though in the process they may well manage to hit a lot of legitimate journalism as well. I mean, let's remember that this happened in France. She was being chased by half a dozen French photographers, and France is a country which has the strictest privacy laws in Europe, among the strictest of any democracy in the world. And I think there's a lot of politicians have been gunning for the press because they think the press is too powerful, and they will use this for all the wrong reasons as an attempt to gang up on us. And at an emotional time like this, there will be an emotional frenzy, a feeding frenzy against the press. Obviously, the behavior of the paparazzi is regularly a disgrace. But what can a British Parliament do about that? Why would a single British law have changed what happened, the dreadful events in Paris last night?
But there are those who would say, surely it is not beyond the wit of man and woman to come up with some kind of way in which you can separate the activities of those paparazzi. One of the suggestions we've had earlier in the programme is that there might be some kind of international agreement between proprietors right across the world, because if they made it plain they were not going to pay the paparazzi, then the paparazzi would have no incentive to go out and take those photographs.
And if you believe that's possible, you believe in the tooth fairy.
You don't think that anything like that is possible?
I'm afraid not. I mean, I've never been involved in buying these sort of pictures, and I think a lot of decent journalists aren't. But, you know, the more the British public or British politicians complain about this thing, then they ought to look at themselves in the mirror. Because the papers, and I've never edited one, but the papers that sell most and prosper most out of these kind of pictures are the ones the British public themselves buy. So when they're complaining about the paparazzi, they ought to remember that these guys wouldn't have a job if the great British public didn't buy these papers in their millions in the first place.
Andrew Neil, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we're going over to Richmond in Yorkshire now, where the leader of the Conservative Party, William Hague, walking here with his fiancée, Fionn Jenkins. You're watching him live at his home as he comes to make a statement about the death of the Princess of Wales.
The tragic news from Paris.
Well, I want to express on behalf of my party and on behalf of my constituents here in Yorkshire our sadness and terrible shock at the news overnight. It has come as a great shock to everybody waking up this morning, and a great sadness to all of us, and of course we're all thinking about Prince William and Prince Harry and the other members of the family of the Princess. She was a unique and very lively and attractive individual, and so people will feel a personal sense of loss. But of course we should also pay tribute today to the tremendous work that she did for people involved with drugs, people with AIDS and other diseases, for homeless people, for young people in general, for causes such as the arts. She did a great deal of charitable and humanitarian work, and I think we should recognize that and salute that today. She was a shining individual who will never be forgotten, and I think that is how we should remember her. It's at times like this when politicians should pull together and sink our differences for a while. So I have cancelled my trip, which would have begun later today, to Scotland to campaign in the referendum campaign. I think the whole nation is united in sadness, and politicians should lead and respect that.
Have you agreed with the Prime Minister to suspend political activity for the foreseeable future?
No, I haven't spoken to him yet, but that is just an action I have taken. It's for other parties to consider their own position, but I think all parties will want a period of suspension of political activity. I haven't had a chance to talk to the other parties yet, but that's certainly what I will be doing.
What do you have to say about the reported conduct of these photographers in Paris?
Well, it's reported conduct. I don't think any of us can prejudge these things. Apparently the French police are still interviewing these people. We'll all want to know what happened. It is an illustration of the possible illustration of the intensity of the intrusion sometimes into the lives of public figures. But we shouldn't jump to any conclusions about what happened without knowing the details, nor should we jump to any conclusions about anything that should be done.
Mr. Hague, thank you very much indeed for coming out to talk to us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, there you are, Mr. Hague, announcing that normal political activity for...
And as you heard, the Leader of the Opposition, William Hague, talking about a period of suspension of political activity, which he is calling for. He says he hasn't talked to the other political leaders about it, but that is his suggestion in the wake of this tragic death in a car crash of the Princess of Wales. He talked about her being a shining individual and the great shock and sadness that would have been felt by everyone throughout the country to wake up this morning to that sad news. She was unique, very lively and attractive as an individual. He said that is how we will remember her, and we will recognise and salute her charitable work. Jenny, we've had these tributes from the politicians now, all of them clearly deeply moved by what we've seen. But can you tell me what you think is going to be the implications, the repercussions of this as far as the royal family is concerned?
Well, I think they're going to take a very long time to gather themselves together and assess just how major this impact is. Two young boys now left without their mother, two young boys who've had a very difficult life thus far. Diana was doing her very best to bring up William as a worthy future king, and she felt she still had some work to do in that direction. They will take a very long time to gather themselves together, and I hope there won't be too many recriminations in these early days amongst themselves. I mean, Diana herself admitted she had a difficult and at times sad life within that family, but no one could have predicted that this would happen. There are tributes coming in, of course, from her friends now as well as politicians. The latest is from Jemima Khan. She was very close to Jemima Khan, the wife of Imran Khan. And she said she was horrified, lost for words, and said of Diana she was an amazing and remarkable woman, a loyal friend, and a genuine crusader who did a great deal for others. And I think that is how she will be remembered by very many people.
Jenny Bond, our court correspondent, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Bowden, as well, for joining us. And because of today's tragic events, the BBC has changed its television schedules for the rest of the day. At midday, we'll resume full coverage of the events so far today. But first, details of those changes to the BBC schedules coming up in just a few seconds.
This is BBC Television from London. In light of today's tragic news, normal programmes have been suspended. We will return to the newsroom in a few minutes at midday. Now John Ketley is in the Weather Centre.
Hello, well, gloomy skies and gloomy weather across many parts of the country today. We've seen a band of rain moving northwards this morning up into Scotland, some heavy rain across in Northern Ireland, and now we're seeing some heavy storms developing through Wales into the Western Midlands, and they'll push up into Northern England in the next few hours. Further south and east, we'll find the skies brightening, some sunshine, but also some thunderstorms breaking out as the wet weather continues to push north across the rest of Scotland in the next 6 to 9 hours. Pretty cold and windy up there as well, only 16 degrees, but a warm and humid 23 to 25 across parts of southeast Britain. This area of low pressure then continuing its way northwards tonight. That's where much of the rain's going to be. Somewhat drier weather into the south, but a few showers feeding onto those western coasts. Breezy tonight then, temperatures about 13. Well, let's look at the charts then for the next few days. This area of low pressure pushing northwards very rapidly in the next 36 hours, and then we'll see the fronts moving in from the Atlantic. So it's going to be a typical autumn scene, really. We're going to find weather fronts coming in from time to time. A lot of wind here coming through on Tuesday into Wednesday too, with a belt of fairly persistent rain coming in across many parts of Britain. Sunshine and showers though to lead to the second half of the week, so it's going to be a pretty mixed spell coming up, often windy and a lot of showers around. Now, as far as tomorrow's concerned, some bright weather over eastern parts, the south not seeing too many showers, a lot of heavy showers in the west and particularly across the north of the country, and some wet weather for a time across those northern parts of Scotland. Not too many showers in the east at all on Tuesday, in fact a dry start, plenty of sunshine hanging on. But a belt of rain will swing in from the west during the day, and that wetter weather eventually pulling on to the eastern side of the country during Wednesday. Sunshine and showers then follows in across most of the country during Thursday and Friday. So it's a really mixed spell, temperatures really changing little, about 18 to 20 and plenty of rain to come. Bye-bye.
This is BBC Television from London. Normal programming has been suspended, and we now join Martin Lewis in the news studio.
This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to hospital in the early hours of the morning. Surgeons tried for 2 hours to save her life, but she died at 3 o'clock. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, "The Queen and the Prince of Wales are deeply shocked and distressed by this terrible news." Normal programmes on BBC Television have been suspended while we bring you the latest developments. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Prince of Wales will fly to Paris later today to accompany the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, back to Britain. The Princess died after a car crash in the French capital in the early hours of this morning. Her companion, Dodi Fayed, and their driver were also killed in the accident. The Princess was taken to hospital in Paris with severe chest injuries. Surgeons spent 2 hours trying to save her life, but she died at 3 o'clock. She had been a passenger in a car which crashed in a tunnel next to the River Seine. The accident happened as press photographers pursued the car at high speeds through the tunnel under Place de l'Alma in the centre of the city. The Princess's Mercedes went out of control and smashed into a wall. The French authorities have begun a criminal investigation. 7 photographers are being questioned as witnesses. Tributes have been paid this morning. In Britain, the Prime Minister said he was utterly devastated. She was, he said, a wonderful and warm human being who touched the lives of so many others in Britain and throughout the world with comfort. The leader of the opposition, William Hague, said he was absolutely shocked. The whole nation will be in shock and in tears at this awful news, he said. The Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, said, "I'm speechless with shock at the horror and sadness of this terrible tragedy." Tributes have also come from right across the world. The French President, Jacques Chirac, said Diana, Princess of Wales, was a young woman of our age, warm, full of life and generosity. And President Clinton said he and his wife were profoundly saddened by this tragic event. From Lambeth Palace, a spokesman for the Archbishop of Canterbury said the prayers of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York will be with the families of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Mr. Al Fayed at this tragic moment. And Cardinal Hume, leader of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales, said, "I am greatly distressed at the news of Princess Diana and the awful suddenness in which it came upon us all." Mourners have gathered at Buckingham Palace and at the Princess's London home, Kensington Palace. Flowers have been laid at the gates. Our correspondent Alison Holt reports.
The twisted wreckage of the Mercedes in which the Princess was travelling is the clearest testimony to the sheer force of the crash. The accident happened shortly after midnight. According to eyewitnesses, the car hit a pillar in a tunnel on one of the fast-flowing roads which runs alongside the River Seine. They were apparently being pursued at high speed by photographers on motorbikes. Within minutes of the crash, the area was sealed off as police and ambulance teams struggled to reach the 4 trapped inside. Dodi Al-Fayed, the Princess's constant companion in recent weeks, was dead at the scene, as was their chauffeur. The Princess and her bodyguard had to be cut from the wreckage. Both were taken to hospital with serious injuries. Those who witnessed the aftermath of the accident knew the gravity of what they were seeing.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later, ambulance about 15 minutes later.
At the hospital, there was no word on the princess's condition for several hours, but inside doctors were fighting to save her. She had severe internal injuries and underwent emergency surgery. But just before 5 o'clock this morning, the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement broke the tragic news that the princess had died.
Au nom du gouvernement français,
he expressed the regret of the French people, but it was the British ambassador to Paris who voiced the deep shock and sorrow that was felt by all.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident. The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales. I should like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister and the French authorities and the medical team here at this hospital for all they have done tonight at the time of this terrible tragedy. Thank you.
7 photographers were arrested immediately after the accident and driven away by police for questioning. Their motorbikes and scooters were also taken away for further investigation. The high-speed chase involving the paparazzi is thought to have begun as the couple left the Ritz Hotel, where they'd been having dinner. The hotel belongs to Mr. Al Fayed's father, and the man driving them was a security agent from the Ritz. Mohammed Al Fayed's spokesman says the whole family is devastated.
I've spoken to Mr. Al Fayed, and his view is that this is an appalling and quite needless tragedy. The world has lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable, and Mr. Al Fayed has lost his beloved eldest son. Mr. and Mrs. Al Fayed are devastated by their loss, and they share the sorrow of the princess's family.
Political reaction to the tragedy was swift. The Prime Minister spoke of his sorrow at the news.
Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her 2 sons, the 2 boys. Our hearts go out to them. We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us. She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy, she touched the lives of so many others in Britain, throughout the world, with joy and with comfort. How many times shall we remember her, in how many different ways? With the sick, the dying, with children, with the needy. When with just a look or a gesture that spoke so much more than words, she would reveal to all of us the depth of her compassion and her humanity. You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her, they regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain.
She was an incredible figure. She had real star quality, as we will all never forget, and she used her position to do a great deal of good on drug issues, on AIDS issues, and so on. Of course, she was from time to time a controversial figure. I think it's, as Robin Cook has said, people will need to ask questions about intrusion into private life, but it's also too early to draw any general conclusions from one terrible incident.
For the moment, this is a personal tragedy of the most terrible sort, and I think a sense of loss and grievance for the nation and all who knew her. Her contribution was extraordinary in many ways, to things like HIV, to drugs, to AIDS, to the issue of landmines, for which she became very famous in recent days. And I think we should remember somebody who brought light and colour and compassion to our lives.
And outside the Princess's home, Kensington Palace, the people have begun laying flowers in tribute. Some overcome with their grief. The scenes have been repeated outside Buckingham Palace, with people quietly paying their respects, stunned by the news. At Balmoral, where the royal family is spending the summer, flags are flying at half-mast. It was here that Prince Charles was told of Princess Diana's death, and it was here where he had to break the news to their sons. This morning, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh went to worship at the local church. The Prince of Wales will fly to Paris this afternoon.
I think at a time like this we ought to be focusing our prayers on the two boys. Of course, and Dodie, who was in the car with her and the chauffeur, we mustn't forget them either, because they're valuable in the sight of Almighty God. But to pray particularly for the two boys who will now grow up without a dearly loved mother, and they will need the support not only of Prince Charles, but everyone to take account of them as they grow up.
The tunnel where the accident happened has now been reopened, and there too flowers have been left as a mark of people's sorrow. In coming days there will be many questions to be answered about the cause of the accident, but as that investigation gets underway, few have yet grasped the full impact of the tragedy. Alison Holt, BBC News.
Our correspondent James Robbins joins me now from the hospital in Paris where Princess Diana died. James, could you chart for us the efforts to revive the Princess of Wales from the moment that she was seen in the car by the medical teams through to the operating theatre? Was every effort made that could be made to save her?
As I understand it, every effort was made, both at the scene, where the Princess was attended by a large number of paramedics. She had to be freed from the wreckage, as I understand it. They tried to assess the amount of damage to her body. They found that she was already hemorrhaging badly at the scene. I think once or twice they had to resuscitate her at the scene before she was eventually brought here to hospital. Now, there was a lengthy process at the scene of the accident to try and save her life before she was brought here to the hospital behind me. Some 1.5 hours after the accident happened, she was admitted. We believe she was still alive. She was suffering from very severe internal bleeding from massive hemorrhaging. The doctors started operating. They hoped that they could keep her heart pumping. They started massage. Eventually, they started lengthy external massage to try and restart her heart. She died in effect of a heart attack from the massive hemorrhaging she was suffering. The doctors here, 2 professors of medicine, some of the most senior consultants in Paris, worked for over 2 hours to try and bring her back to life until they finally accepted defeat at about 4 o'clock Paris time, and it's here that her body now remains.
It must have been extremely difficult accepting defeat like that when your patient was the Princess of Wales.
From what we understand, the whole staff of the hospital were touched by what's happened here. This is one of the largest accidents and emergency hospitals in Paris, in this great capital city. It happens to be close to the scene, and of course they were stunned when they realized what had happened and that the Princess of Wales had been brought here to them, and that any possibility of reviving her lay with them. The hospital staff, of course, have said nothing publicly beyond the short statement that the 2 doctors made after they admitted that they could not bring her back to life. They and the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement were here in the early hours to confirm formally that the Princess had died, to offer their condolences on behalf of the whole people of France, to the people of Britain, and of course particularly to the royal family.
And James, amidst all that has been happening this morning, we of course mustn't forget the friend of the Princess of Wales, Dodi Fayed, who died with her. Couldn't anything have been done to save him?
Apparently not. Dodi Fayed was actually declared dead at the scene of the accident, as I understand it. His body was brought here to the hospital, but he had been declared dead at the scene of the crash. He suffered terrible injuries there, as did the driver of the car, who was also declared dead at the scene. Now, of course, we're awaiting later on today the arrival of the Prince of Wales and the first moves to bring the Princess's body home.
Thank you, James Robbins, and we'll be talking to Michael Cole, the spokesman for Mohammed Al Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, in a few minutes. But within the last hour, the Princess's brother, Earl Spencer, has been speaking from South Africa about her death.
All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case. It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today. My heart goes out to the families of the others killed in this incident. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and two sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy. I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace. Thank you.
Earl Spencer, brother of the Princess of Wales, talking in Cape Town earlier today. Well, I'm joined from Harrods by the spokesman for Mohammed Al Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, who died in the same car crash that killed the Princess of Wales, Michael Cole. Michael, can I put to you what Earl Spencer has just been saying? He said, I always believed the press would kill her in the end. He accused the press of having a direct hand in her death, and he said that every editor and newspaper had blood on their hands if they had pursued the princess for pictures. Do you share those extremely strong views, powerfully expressed?
Chilling words, Martin. Mr. Al Fayed said to me this morning that this tragedy, this appalling tragedy, would never have happened but for the attentions of these people who I suppose we shall have to call photographers. Mr. Al Fayed is in Paris. He's with his son, as you would expect him to be. He's a very strong, he's got great strength, fortitude and courage, but getting over this is going to take some doing. He loved his son very deeply, and he loved the princess too. She enjoyed his company. She liked his sense of humor, broad though it is, and she enjoyed being with the family. Together she saw a united, happy, strong family, and I know that she appreciated that when she was there with her sons. In fact, I think I can say that she paid me the great courtesy of telephoning me after the holiday, and she said it was the most wonderful holiday they'd ever had. And she said, we're all suffering from withdrawal symptoms. It was just wonderful.
Michael, can you tell me what it was that was wonderful about this holiday? Because we are talking about the last week of life of the Princess of Wales. What was special about the time that she had there that she perhaps hadn't been able to have so often elsewhere?
Well, I think she went down to the south of France, and she took her sons with her, and she'd spoken to her advisors and to her stepmother beforehand, and she had a wonderful time. And I think partly that is due to Dodi, because he joined the party. He's a very kind, very gentle, I'm talking about him in the present tense, but he was a very kind, very gentle, very courteous person, and he had a great respect and regard for her. He valued her friendship, as did the whole of the family. Dodie and Diana had got to know each other 10 years ago at a Harrods polo match, and the families were close. Mr. Al-Fayed had the greatest respect for the princess's late father, Earl Spencer, and in return, Lord Spencer was a great supporter of Mr. Fayed through thick and thin. And I think that Mohammed used to say he was his brother, and I don't think that was really stretching a point. He did regard him as his brother. And Dodie was wonderful with children. He has 4 stepbrothers and stepsisters. For instance, when we had a premiere party for the film Mission Impossible at Harrods in the restaurant here last year, there were all the Hollywood stars there, people Dodie knows, Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise and George Clooney. And his brothers and sisters, who are much younger than him, between the ages of 10 and 16, said, "Oh, Dodie, take me to introduce me, take me to introduce me." And he had time, and he took them round, and he was charming with them. And I know that's exactly the same way he was with Prince Harry and Prince William.
Michael, can you tell me something about the crash and the circumstances of the crash? Because the car in which they were both killed was a car belonging to the Ritz Hotel, which is owned by Mr. Al-Fayed, and it was driven by, I gather, one of his very senior security officers who is well capable of driving cars at speed. So could you tell us just a little bit about the circumstances of their departure from the hotel and what happened afterwards?
Well, I don't know everything, but I'll tell you what I know. The princess and Mr. Fayed had been to dinner. I'm told by Mr. Al-Fayed that there were some 30 photographers outside. They did leave in a car. It is a very formidable car, an S-Series Mercedes, probably one of the safest cars in the world. And it was driven by a chauffeur who's worked for the Ritz Hotel for many years, a very solid, dependable, conscientious, mature person behind whom Mr. Al-Fayed has often driven. Indeed, I have myself. And the chauffeurs for the Ritz often work for the French government. The Ministry of Justice is right next door, and they are very skilled chauffeurs. They do a lot of government business. I don't know exactly what happened, apart from what I heard from one of your correspondents earlier about photographers on mopeds coming and swooping close to the car. I don't know what happened. All I do know is that it wouldn't have happened but for this pursuit. You must remember, Martin, that in the south of France, when they were there, and people who I hope are regretting what they said about people posing or encouraging or courting publicity. In the south of France, they didn't want any publicity at all, but both Mr. Al-Fayed and the princess accepted most of it with good humor, and they put up with it. But there is an awful lot of difference between that and a hot pursuit through the dark streets of Paris at high speed.
Have you any idea why that hot pursuit would have been taking place? What was it that those paparazzi were after? Because many members of the public won't understand that.
Well, it doesn't happen so much in this country, but in France it's almost a tradition. There is a sort of Gallic kamikaze faction, I think, and these people almost think it's a part of machismo to take greater and greater chances, and they do pursue personalities. Yes, there is a law of privacy, but the law of privacy, I think, comes into effect when things are published, not when they're gathered. And of course the market for these pictures isn't just France, it's next door in Italy, it's next door in Germany. There are magazines, I mean, 60 of them have rung us this morning as if we want to talk to them. You know, there is a tremendous market for this, and they pursue people. Fortunately, and I think the British press does not do that, there are one or two, shall we say, wild cards over here, and the princess has suffered over the years, but not to quite the extent that this is commonplace in Paris and on the Riviera.
So you would accept that, given the anger we've heard expressed this morning by some ordinary people as they gather outside Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, the anger that they feel about the paparazzi, you, on behalf of Mr. Al-Fayed, would say there should be a clear distinction drawn between the paparazzi in Paris and those in Britain who, on the whole, behave in a totally different way?
I think there's always been more responsibility here. But listen, Martin, Mr. Al-Fayed, anger, no, he's worried, he's concerned for the families. He's concerned for Prince William and Prince Harry, for Her Majesty the Queen, for the Prince of Wales. He's concerned for the sisters of the princess and for her brother and for her mother and for her stepmother. He's concerned about his son. He's concerned about bringing his son home because he wants to bring Dodi home to Britain. The government, the last government, said that Mr. Al-Fayed isn't entitled to have a British passport. But Mr. Al-Fayed feels very patriotic about this country. He employs 5,000 British people across the road. He pays £3 billion in personal income tax. He contributes to the national exchequer. His second home is here, and he wants to bring Dodi home.
Michael, we're talking about an international tragedy, but also a personal tragedy for you. Harrods is very much a store with an international reputation. Is Harrods planning to do anything to reflect not only your own personal grief, but the grief that many people feel in Britain and around the world about what has happened?
Well, in all his trouble this morning, Mr. Al-Fayed rang me and said, please, Michael, will you make sure that our big flag, our best flag, is flying at half-mast, but all the other flags are removed from the roof of the building. But Harrods is a great British institution, and Harrods will open tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, as our customers expect and as Britain expects.
And a final thought about Mr. Al-Fayed, who clearly is hugely distressed by what has happened. How do you think he will be bearing up under the circumstances of this devastating blow?
Well, Martin, you've met him. Mr. Al-Fayed is a man of great resilience, of great courage, of great strength and fortitude.
Michael Cole, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And as we have been seeing throughout this morning, the issue of privacy and the pursuit of people with high public profiles is clearly in the news and going to be in the news much earlier than we thought. Robin Oakley in Downing Street has some details about what the government here might be doing about privacy. Robin.
Well, I think for the moment, Martin, the government's instinct is rather to wait and see. I think they're anticipating a big anti-media backlash in the aftermath of Princess Diana's death. They are expecting to have public demands for action, but Mr. Blair's instinct up until now has been for self-regulation of the media. There have been various commissions sitting into the question of privacy in the past. Governments have tried to face up to these problems of what can be done. There's always this problem of what you can do to curb intrusion without curbing legitimate journalistic inquiry at the same time. And so we've tended not to see privacy laws under the last Conservative government, which was sometimes minded to go for them. What we are likely to see is the implementation of the European Convention on Human Rights, which pays some attention to privacy questions.
Yes, please. Sorry, yes, please go on.
And I was going to say that the Lord Chancellor has indicated and has warned Fleet Street that the probable result of that will be that judges will make some kind of privacy law rather on a case-by-case basis. I don't think what we're going to see, unless there is a really high public clamour, is any government attempt to introduce new privacy laws directly.
So the suggestion that was floated, I think it was a few weeks ago, or indeed a few days ago, was that it would be better to have some kind of a privacy law rather than allow it to be built up on a case-by-case basis, or was it the other way around?
Well, the feeling, I think, in government circles at the moment is that it is for Fleet Street to look to its own practices. After all, people are saying the paparazzi wouldn't do what they did unless there was a market for their pictures in this country as well as on the continent. And I think there's a strong feeling among ministers that Fleet Street has got to look at its own practices, satisfy itself that it is behaving according to its own code of conduct under the Press Complaints Commission, which does, after all, ban intrusive photography and invasion of private property and seeking entry by fraud.
Robin Oakley in Downing Street, thank you for joining us. And if you have just tuned in, this is a special BBC programme going to Britain and the world because of the death of the Princess of Wales early this morning. Brian Hanrahan, our foreign editor, is in the newsroom with Foreign Reaction. Brian, what are people saying? What tributes are coming in for the Princess of Wales?
Well, the news has swept around the world like a thunderbolt. You can see almost the way in which people are waking up to the news, except perhaps in America, where President Clinton heard the news before he went to bed last night. He was at a party. He was told that the princess had died. He watched television there for several minutes with his aides. It has been being shown on live television across the United States. People are intensely interested in what has happened, and they have said that they're deeply shocked by what was happening. Of course, Princess Diana was a frequent visitor to the United States. She was there in June when she was helping with her campaign against landmines, and she saw Mrs. Clinton then, who has paid tribute to her as someone who has picked up on many of the very strong issues that Mrs. Clinton feels very strongly about herself, aid to the victims of war around the globe. But you can trace the pattern of it. It starts in Asia, where we have Hong Kong, Cambodia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. We have leaders in Australia and New Zealand all paying their respects. And of course what they're doing is they're reflecting not their own personal feelings, of course, although that must be part of it, but they're reflecting the chord that she struck with ordinary people. I mean, the world does not respond in this way on a pro forma basis. Leaders are standing up and saying these things because she made such an impact on so many people.
Yes, and that impact, of course, as you say, provokes these incredible statements, these amazing thoughts and tributes that are coming for the princess. I suppose part of the world has not really yet woken up to the news of the disaster.
Well, it came in at the United States as people were going to bed, and probably people there are still beginning to understand it. Most of the rest of the world, you can see from the flood of reaction, has now heard about it. I mean, we have President Mandela, who paid a tribute this morning, talking about his sense of shock. He said Princess Di captured the imagination of our people more recently because her visit to Angola and for her principled stance in opposing the use of anti-personnel landmarks and in her meeting with the victims. The ANC joins millions of our people and nations of the world in expressing its heartfelt sympathies to the Queen, the people of the United Kingdom, family and friends. And we understand that President Mandela is planning to hold a press conference in which he may say some of these things himself.
The princess was clearly a world icon. Is there also a sense of loss because she has been cut off in the prime of her life when there was so much humanitarian work that she could have gone on to do?
Undoubtedly. There has been a change in the world's reaction. I can recall being in Australia in the early 80s when, as a freshly married couple, the Prince and Princess of Wales captured the imagination of Australia like almost nothing before. It was a storm of interest. But if I may put it that way, she was a slight figure then. She was a fashion icon. She was someone who wore glamorous dresses. She was very pretty. Everybody liked her naturalness and her charm. But now she has matured into a much more formidable figure in people's minds, someone who's associated with causes, who has helped the United Nations, who has picked up this major issue of landmines and forced it into the world's consciousness. And people are beginning to see that there was somebody there who, I suppose you might call it political naivety almost, but refused to allow conventional political ideas to stand in her way. When she felt for something, when she felt an emotion, she moved with it, and that has undoubtedly struck chords around the world.
Brian, thanks very much indeed, and Jenny Bond, our court correspondent, is still with us. Is that right, do you think, Jenny, what Brian was saying, that in fact there is this tremendous potential that the princess had to do phenomenal work in all kinds of ways, and that losing her at this time is simply a world tragedy, not just a tragedy for the people of Britain?
I think, yes, a very, very strong way of putting it, but is undoubtedly true, particularly on the landmine issue. She had really brought the world's attention to that, and it's quite interesting that International Development Junior Minister George Fawkes, in fact, has said that a worldwide ban on landmines would be a fitting tribute to her now. Yes, I think she will be missed worldwide for her work in all those fields.
Well, joining us also in the studio is Phyllis Cunningham, Director of the Royal Marsden Hospital. Now, Mrs. Cunningham, you went to New York with the princess at the time that her dresses were about to be auctioned. Can you tell me what it was like being with her at that time when she was losing so many of her treasured possessions in order to help your particular charity?
She was quite radiant.
and although she was losing those possessions, she had spoken to me before the event, in fact, when Prince William had the idea, and she was thrilled that it was his idea, and she thought that it was tremendous that he had come up with this. But she wasn't sad at losing those possessions. She was pleased and delighted that the results of that sale were actually going to be doing something that she was passionate about, and that was leading research into cancer in our case, and of course AIDS in the other charities' case, something that she had always had an enormous interest in.
She was delighted, as you say, with William coming up with the idea. Did she talk much about her sons?
Yes, she did. She came to the hospital on many occasions, both formally on public visits, but more often on private visits.
Let me stop you there, because we are going back now to Balmoral, where the royal family are leaving the church at the end of their service. A service in which, of course, prayers were said and the Princess of Wales was remembered. The Queen was at the service, so was the Queen Mother. So too, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, with the two princes. And you see the convoy leaving now, the church where they always went for service, where they always go. And this morning was no exception, but a very poignant service would have taken place in the church, and a small crowd, as you saw briefly, had gathered. And Jenny, the prince is now leaving for Paris, or will do very shortly.
We don't have a specific time, but clearly if he's going to go today, he will have to be leaving very shortly, yes, from Aberdeen to Paris, to go to Paris and go to the hospital and thank the staff before accompanying his late wife's body back to the UK. He'll be accompanied by her two sisters, Lady Sarah McCorquodale and Lady Jane Fellows. We have not been told that the boys are going to go, so perhaps the presumption should be that they are not going to. We're told of their demeanour in the church that the two boys, William and Harry, were quite understandably looking grief-stricken but calm.
Jenny, thank you very much. And in France, Princess Diana's death has shocked a nation which followed her movements in minute detail. Our correspondent, Kate Adey, is in Paris.
Shortly after midnight, in the heart of Paris, the black Mercedes carrying 4 people crashed. Emergency crews were quickly on the scene, a riverside underpass. The car was wrecked. It's believed that Dodi Al-Fayed died instantly, and the driver, who was one of his employees. First reports described the Princess of Wales as having arm and thigh injuries and concussion, as she was cut free from the vehicle by fire crews and the police. Over an hour after the accident, she was taken to La Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. And at that time, the gravity of her injuries was not publicly known. She had massive chest injuries and was hemorrhaging. The princess suffered a massive heart attack. The doctors intervened desperately. But despite their efforts, she died at 4 o'clock. By then, the royal family and both British and French governments had been informed, the French Prime Minister paying tribute.
Les Français ont toujours été séduits par son charme.
The French have always been captivated by her charm, by her personality and humanity. I'd like also to extend my sympathies to the people of Britain.
The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends, and with the family and friends of the others who died in the accident.
The car had left the Ritz Hotel last night, after the Princess and Dodi Al-Fayed had dined together. They were driven from the hotel's rear entrance, with both of them in the back of the car. The 4th passenger was a member of the hotel's security staff. He survived and is being treated in hospital. The car was pursued by at least 7 photographers on motorcycles or possibly in cars. The underpass is well lit and the details of the accident are not yet clear. By this morning there was shock in the air. The site of the accident is a mundane traffic tunnel in the centre of the city. Those who'd heard the early morning news turned up in a state of grief. The traffic was flowing again through the tunnel, while appalled and sorrowful people brought their tributes. Kate Adie, BBC News, Paris.
Diana, Princess of Wales, had an enormous following too in the United States. President Clinton has already expressed his grief at her death. From Washington, Tom Carver reports.
Diana always loved America. The size of the country, the enthusiasm of the people, the energy of this society. Coming here, even on duty, often felt like an escape from the criticism and gossip back home. And America repaid that love in full. To millions of ordinary Americans, Diana never lost that image of a fairy tale princess.
Unbelievable. That's a dream come true. We were just all screaming at her and she shook my hand. And I was shaking afterwards and I still can't believe it.
Really exciting. Yeah, really exciting. All that it was built up to be.
She was passing out flowers to everyone and she walked by and I stuck out my hand and I got to touch her hand.
Wherever she went in America, she was feted.
Chicago, that wonderful town.
She clearly enjoyed her time in Chicago last summer when she danced with talk show host Phil Donahue. This was her first trip overseas since agreeing to a divorce, and she chose a country in which she felt at home and truly appreciated. At the White House, she was always welcome. Even when her divorce was finalized and she was cast out of the royal circle, the Clintons continued to invite her to their home. Last September, she was Hillary Clinton's guest of honor at a breakfast for breast cancer research and was warmly praised by the First Lady.
This is one of the nicest British invasions that the White House has ever had. It's because she is a woman who has had a tireless commitment to the homeless, to AIDS, cancer, leprosy, and other health issues.
But it wasn't her good works which endeared her to Americans so much as her star quality. This was never so evident as her first trip to the White House back in 1985, when her beauty and youth added a touch of Camelot to an aging president. Her presence even seemed to make him nervous.
Nancy and I are deeply honored to welcome the Prince and Princess of Wales to the White House, and express also our great happiness that we have been able to have this affair with Princess Diane here on her first trip to the United States, that we should be able to share in that first trip.
That was the night she danced with John Travolta, which cast her as a celebrity equal to any of America's own.
John, how does this rate as Saturday Night Fever? How does this rate as Saturday Night Fever? It's good Saturday Night Fever.
America's own celebrities fought each other for tickets to every event she attended. And 12 years later, they were still turning out in force to see Diana. She had that priceless combination of Hollywood star quality and the mystique of royalty which Americans yearned for. Her last trip to the States was in June, when she came to Washington as part of her campaign against landmines. Recently, she talked of wanting to live outside Britain, and America would certainly have been one of her favorite destinations. Had she lived, she may well have settled one day in New York. You'll never know. But there's no doubt that America and the people would have welcomed her with open arms. Tom Carver, BBC News, Washington.
The former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Runcie, who married the Prince and Princess of Wales in 1981 and who christened their children, has been giving his reactions.
Very stunned and full of a desire to pray and do my best for all those most affected who loved Diana most and were dearest to her, the children and her brothers and sisters and Prince Charles and the royal family.
What are your memories of the wedding?
My memories are all happy and so far as Diana is concerned, a great sense of her eagerness to be up to it, and having to assure her that she was up to it, and a real tender desire to be what everybody expected of her. And I treasure some of the heartfelt and sincere letters she wrote about that time.
When you say assuring her she was up to it, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that she needed, she was very tender, and she needed that sort of assurance. I remember that about a year afterwards, I met her, and she said to me rather touchingly, she said, I think I've got it now. I've got it here, she said. I may not have got it up here, but I've got it here. And you know, thank you for being helpful when I need it.
There was the famous wedding, of course.
Well, the South African President, Nelson Mandela, has also been paying tribute to Princess Diana's work outside of the United Kingdom. He said she'd been a critical figure in the campaign for a worldwide ban on the production and use of landmines.
We were all devastated by the tragic news of the death of Princess Diana. I had the honor of hosting her a few months ago when she visited our country. And I was tremendously impressed by her. She was undoubtedly one of the best ambassadors of Great Britain, associated with worthy causes like the campaign against HIV and educating the public on this serious illness, and removing various misconceptions about it. She also has been a critical figure in sensitizing the public about the danger of landmines, especially in our region here. And the fact that countries like South Africa, like Mozambique, as well as Angola, have decided to abolish landmines is due to a very large extent to her intervention. At this sad moment, we think of Her Majesty the Queen, and of course of Princes William and Henry, and we send our deepest condolences to them. I hope to speak to Her Majesty at 5 o'clock today, and to convey our condolences directly to her. I have given permission at the request of our High Commissioner in London for our flag to fly also at half-mast.
And President Mandela referred there to the work of the Princess of Wales in campaigning for a worldwide ban on landmines. And George Fuchs, a junior government minister, earlier this morning said that there really ought to be just such a ban as an appropriate memorial to the princess. It will never replace her, he said, but it would be the best possible memorial to her life, which was cut so tragically short. Jenny Bond, our court correspondent, is with me. Jenny, tragic timing, just as the princess was getting her life together.
Yes, it would of course have been tragic at any time, but it is particularly poignant because, as you say, she was re-establishing control of her life, and it seemed of her happiness. For the first time in very, very many years, we were seeing her being truly happy, appeared to be in love. She told me in a conversation not very long ago that she thought she never would be allowed to find that happiness again because of the pressures of the press. Now, sadly, that seems to have come true.
Jenny, thank you. And of course, as the word spreads across the nation, crowds are gathering at Buckingham Palace, of course, where crowds have gathered so many times before on happier occasions. George Eakin is there. George, what's happening?
Well, Martin, the changing of the guard happened as usual a short time ago. Usually the high point of the holiday for visitors to London, a happy occasion. People stood round in silence and watched the band as they played from the 1st Battalion of the Scots Guards. It's been a sombre morning. Large numbers of tourists are here, and some of the local people who've come along to pay their respects have expressed the feeling that it's a pity that on a day as dark as this they have to share their contemplation with tourism, but they accept that life has to go on. I met a group of soldiers who'd come up specially on the train from Salisbury this morning to lay their own flowers from the Adjutant General's Corps, and that what they wanted to stress was that they felt very strongly the Princess of Wales should be given a state funeral, and if she wasn't, they were very happy to march in her honour.
Thank you, George. And Stephen Evans is at Kensington Palace now, where the wall of flowers appears to be growing by the minute.
It is growing by the minute. It's about 20 yards ahead of me from the palace gates. It goes round this wall, and then around that corner there is a wall of people, a line of people about 100 yards long, simply filing steadily, and they've done that for the last 4 hours really. This wall of flowers is growing and growing literally by the minute. If I look at random at the messages, our Queen of Hearts is prominent on it. So it's every sort of person seems to be coming here, all shapes and sizes, all colours. The one thing that does seem to be common amongst lots of people is that they were touched by that message when the Princess went and visited an AIDS patient. An awful lot of gay men have come here, taken time out to come here, and said that was the moment when the Princess touched them, as it were. So it's a very moving experience here. Apart from the people bringing the flowers all around, there are other people who've simply stood and watched and stared glumly and dumbly for 2 hours and more.
Stephen, thank you. And we're coming up to the 1 o'clock news now. But before we do, let's briefly look back on the life of Diana, Princess of Wales. Her marriage to Prince Charles in 1981 brought glamour to the royal family, but as their relationship deteriorated, she became an increasingly unhappy figure. The couple divorced in August of last year. Diana Frances Spencer was born a commoner, though with strong royal connections. Her family were living on the Queen's estate at Sandringham, where her father, a future Earl Spencer, had rented Park House. Yet her privileged childhood was an insecure one. She was 6 when her sisters went away to school and her parents decided to split up. The children became pawns in a bitter custody dispute. Lady Diana was sent to boarding school, eventually attending Westheath Public School in Kent. Here she excelled at sport, particularly swimming. Lady Diana's naturally shy manner hid a wry sense of humour and an easy way with people. Children were especially charmed by her. A regular Pied Piper, said one member of her family. She worked in London, first as a nanny, occasionally as a cook, and then as an assistant at the Young England kindergarten in Knightsbridge.
I wanted to teach children, and they said, why not come along? So I first started off doing afternoons, and then I took over the mornings and did whole days. But I only worked 3 days a week at kindergarten, and the other 2 I looked after American baby boy.
Her parents had divorced, and there was a new Countess Spencer, daughter of the romantic novelist Barbara Cartland. But soon it was Diana who was to become the celebrated member of the family. Rumours spread that her friendship with the Prince of Wales was blossoming into something more serious. Press and television besieged her at every turn. The palace tried in vain to play down speculation. And on the 24th of February 1981, the engagement became official. The wedding took place at St. Paul's on a perfect July day. Millions of television viewers around the world were dazzled by the event. Diana was just 20. And so the royal family welcomed a newcomer to its midst. It was the love story that brought crowds onto the streets again. They came to see the Queen, of course, and the Prince, but most of all, they came to see her. But the seemingly perfect fairy tale was destined not to have a storybook ending. From the moment their relationship had begun, doubts had been expressed over the long-term prospects of a marriage between two people who appeared to have little in common and whose age gap was nearly 13 years. Even by the end of their honeymoon, Diana had developed the eating disorder bulimia and was feeling confused and neglected by Charles. Within a year of her marriage, she gave birth to a son, William. William became the first male heir to go to kindergarten. From the time of her dazzling appearance on her first public engagement with her then husband-to-be, Diana's wardrobe became a continual focus of attention. The publication of the book Diana, Her True Story by Andrew Morton blew the lid off the whole story. The book, based on interviews with some of the princess's closest friends and written with the tacit approval of the princess herself, confirmed that her relationship with the Prince of Wales was cold and distant. It told of half-hearted suicide attempts by the princess during the early years of the marriage, and of her obsession with the belief that Charles continued to love a woman he'd fallen for years before, Camilla Parker Bowles. The prince later confirmed that he and Camilla had had an extramarital affair. Charles and Diana officially separated in December that year.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that with regret the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
Despite the ensuing furore, public affection for the Princess of Wales remained strong. She had chosen to accept a public role at the hard end of charity work. She was troubled by the problems faced by young people. Here she set the royal seal of approval on a television campaign designed to beat the drugs menace. She urged employers, on behalf of the charity Turning Point, to accept a moral responsibility for their workforce in helping them combat the cause and effects of drug and alcohol addiction.
We must remember then that the majority of Turning Point's clients come from ordinary communities. Very few of them resemble a stereotype junkie or drunk.
The plight of suffering children was a cause close to her heart. She was a regular welcome visitor to the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children in London and was patron of several children's charities. While her husband concentrated on the philosophy and practices of the modern world, Diana homed in on the individual. Abroad too, Diana was proud to publicise the plight of the unfortunate and the rejected. On a visit to Indonesia in 1989, she was praised for publicly shaking hands with lepers, dispelling widely held myths about the disease. Her contributions, as in a revealing speech about those with eating disorders, were often informed by her own experiences.
From early childhood, many had felt they were expected to be perfect, but didn't feel they had the right to express their true feelings to those around them. Feelings of guilt, of self-revulsion and low personal esteem, creating in them a compulsion to dissolve like a disprin and disappear.
The Princess of Wales began by bringing a breath of fresh air and a measure of glamour into the House of Windsor. But she became a sad figure to many as the story of her failed marriage unravelled. Her critics blamed her for helping to strip the monarchy of some of the mystique so important for its survival. But the Princess of Wales' unflagging support for the sick and disadvantaged earned her continued respect, and to the end she remained a figure of public fascination and affection. The Princess of Wales killed in a car crash this morning. In a few minutes, Peter Sissons will be here with the 1 o'clock news, but for now, from me, goodbye.
This is BBC Television. And now we join John Ketley in the Weather Centre.
Hello again. Well, it's been a wet day so far over a large part of the country, all due to this area of low pressure, which is continuing its way northwards. It'll be well clear of the country by lunchtime tomorrow, but then it's a run of sunshine and showers for the rest of Monday. Now, it's been a really colourful radar scene over the past few hours. We can see some heavy storms crossing Wales through southwest England And now across the Western Midlands, here's some of the stormiest weather, and it's all moving northwards, with the odd shower also breaking out across in more eastern parts during the rest of the afternoon. That rain band continuing its way northwards across the rest of Scotland during daylight hours. Tonight, most of the rain will be in the north, with a few showers down these western coasts, and temperatures holding up at 13 as the wind continues to blow. Tomorrow, not too bad across southeastern parts of Britain. Not too many showers around here, but some heavy ones in the west. Still quite blustery winds too. A wet start for the northern half of Scotland with some thunder, but then things cheering up from the south. Another band of rain coming in during Tuesday and Wednesday. Quite windy weather too, and it's going to be rather slow moving across central and then eastern parts during the middle part of the week. A nice day in the east of Scotland and through many parts of eastern England during Tuesday, but the sunshine will disappear eventually. We'll find this band of wet weather, heavy rain too, moving in across western then central parts of the country during Tuesday, and then loitering on the eastern side of Scotland and England for the middle of the week. Elsewhere, sunshine and showers returning, and pretty windy weather too, with possible gales up in the northwestern quarter of the country. And then it's sunshine and showers really for Thursday and Friday. Most people catching some showers, and some of them will be heavy and possibly quite prolonged. That's it from me.
Normal programmes have been suspended for the moment. This means that this afternoon's edition of EastEnders has been postponed, and we hope to show that next Sunday. We'll bring you details of other changes to our programmes as soon as possible. This is BBC Television. Now the 1 o'clock news with Peter Sissons.
This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to hospital in the early hours of the morning. Surgeons tried for 2 hours to save her life, but she died at 3 o'clock British time. Normal programmes on BBC Television have been suspended while we bring you the latest developments. This is BBC Television from London. Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. She was taken to hospital in the early hours of the morning. Surgeons tried for 2 hours to save her life, but she died at 3 o'clock British time. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said the Queen and the Prince of Wales are deeply shocked and distressed by this terrible news. Normal programmes on BBC Television have been suspended while we bring you the latest developments. Prince Charles is to fly to Paris later today to accompany the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, back to Britain. The Princess died after a car crash in the French capital in the early hours of the morning. Her companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, and their driver were also killed in the accident. The Princess was taken after the crash to a Paris hospital with severe chest injuries. Surgeons spent 2 hours trying to save her life. She'd been a passenger in a car which crashed in a tunnel next to the River Seine. The accident happened as press photographers pursued the car at high speeds through the tunnel under the Place de l'Alma in the centre of the city. The Princess's Mercedes hit a road pillar and smashed into a wall. The French authorities have begun a criminal investigation. 7 photographers are being questioned as witnesses. The Prince of Wales broke the news of the Princess's death to his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. The Princess's brother, Earl Spencer, said all those who had come into contact with her would share the family's grief. He said she was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those who suffered. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being. The owner of Harrods, whose son died in the car crash, said the deaths were appalling and quite needless. The world, he said, had lost a princess who is simply irreplaceable. Tributes to Diana, Princess of Wales, have been coming in throughout the morning. The Prime Minister said he was utterly devastated. She was, he said, a wonderful and warm human being who touched the lives of so many others in Britain and throughout the world with comfort. The leader of the opposition, William Hague, said he was absolutely shocked. The whole nation will be in shock and in tears at this awful news. The Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Ashdown, said, I am speechless with shock at the horror and sadness of this terrible tragedy. The Princess of Wales had arrived in Paris after spending a week's holiday in Saint-Tropez in the south of France. In the evening, she and her friend Dodi Fayed dined at the Ritz Hotel. At midnight, the couple left the hotel by the rear entrance in their Mercedes, the car allegedly pursued by photographers. Half an hour later, the Mercedes crashed in a tunnel under the Place de l'Alma. For more than an hour, fire crews worked frantically to free passengers from the wreckage. The princess was rushed to hospital at 2 o'clock Sunday morning for emergency surgery. But 2 hours later, at 4 a.m. French time, doctors pronounced the Princess of Wales dead.
The impact of the crash reduced the Mercedes car in which the princess was travelling to a tangle of wreckage. It apparently ran into a pillar in a tunnel on one of the roads running alongside the River Seine. According to eyewitnesses, the car was being driven fast and was being followed by photographers on motorbikes, the notorious paparazzi, whose attentions Diana found so wearing. The princess's friend, Dodi Al-Fayed, and the chauffeur died at the scene. Diana and her bodyguard were cut from the wreckage and taken to hospital. But it was clear to people who saw what happened how serious the accident was.
We saw a large blue Mercedes, darker blue, and the airbag on the passenger side was deployed. And we saw a lot of liquid on the ground, and we didn't know who it was at the time. Somebody came running towards us, speaking French, shouting in French, and we thought for some reason it was going to blow up in the tunnel. We stood there, watched a little bit, and police came about 7 to 10 minutes later, ambulance about 15 minutes later.
Doctors fought for several hours to save the princess's life, but she'd suffered serious internal injuries and the battle was lost. The dreadful news was announced at 5 o'clock in the morning by the French Interior Minister Jean-Pierre Chevènement.
Au nom du gouvernement français,
he expressed the regret of the French nation. It fell to our ambassador in Paris to put into words the first emotions of the British.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy. The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with